Hello, welcome to my Genesis Premium deck profile. This is sort of an initial list based on the recently revealed stride from last week, so I've not had much time to playtest with it, but I found something that's quite decent to sort of start with, and it's pretty solid, so it's worth doing a deck profile on. So to start with, we have the V-Series starter, Power of New Style. Any V-Series star is fine as long as it draws a card. Then we've got 4 Pyrethers, so this is to help you exploit the Witch engine. So Pyrether is good because basically you've got the Witch crit which you can use when you have a Witch Vanguard. It lets you use your strides as well, and it's a force marker. It's the only Witch that has a force marker actually, so that's quite important as well. And the skills are alright because the Soul Blast 13 can be reduced by 1 for every card that you've called a Witch or Sorceress name. And we do play Kroot, so Kroot can also help to accelerate the soul charge. Plus her other ability actually lets you bounce a unit back to your hand, so you could use Kroot again potentially with this to get even more soul. So when you're high rolling or you're riding up first, you can use this and just give your field power and then just swing heavy. The reason why that's good is because it helps to play into your stride turn, because you want your opponent to start guarding, and the new stride is just not as good if your opponent's still on low damage. So ideally you're trying to get your opponent on high damage first, work your way up by rushing them early game. And then what happens is your opponent's in a position where they're forced to start guarding, and then you start shaving their hand away by triggering the on guard ability of the stride. The other thing is that when you're bouncing cards to hand as well, you can also bounce your Melissas to combo more decking out against your opponent. Then we've got 3 copies of Kroot. I didn't have space ready for a 4th one, but you could maybe mess around to add a 4th in. But I felt maybe 3 might be enough. I don't want to overdo Kroot either because you do deck out, so there is that, unless you play Dreaming Dragon. But I didn't exactly decide what to take out for Dreaming Dragon either, because even the trigger slots are quite tight. So I hadn't really thought about it too deeply just yet. I think Dreaming Dragon you kind of have to be a bit more careful because it means you have to justify playing cards that can selectively bring it back. I guess you got Orange Witch Valencia for that to some extent, so you could always, I guess, rely on Valencia if you did that. So that's always some thought, but Kroot is good because it gets you the soul. It's also good for the stride because it's giving you up to 6 more, so you can do a few more guard breaks with that as well. It's one of the best grade 3s in the clan easily. It's just broken, Kroot. Then there's 3 Veratrum. Veratrum is basically a card that also helps deck your opponent out by 1 card only though, but it's a hand trap, which is important because it can disrupt. It sort of helps with controlling the game pace a little bit, just having a little bit of influence when you need it. Then there's 4 copies of Cardamom. So Cardamom is good because it's a multi-attacker. So the thing is that the stride gets even better because of being able to superior call. So if you're able to just keep calling onto your force 1 marker and then you just hit for another sort of decent number with it, then it's pretty good for that, because then you've got more attacks and they're dropping more, and that's all good. And the deck isn't too Kamalas heavy either, so it works quite well. It also gains 2k. It's exploiting the Witch engine. Because we're playing a Witch grade 3 as our Vanguard, we can superior call this and have the extra power, so it makes columns with the boosters like 18k, 19k if against a grade 4. It's quite good for that as well. And then we have 3 copies of Chamomile. So Chamomile is a 20k beta. That's good because you want your opponent to actually be guarding properly, and if you're on the stride, you put that with a booster as well, 28k. That's not even including the force marker if you choose to put force marker on the same column. So you're already making your opponent actually drop something. Orange Witch can obviously shove this into soul. You don't always have Chamomile out via her ability that Spirit calls, but you can just normal call her if you want to just be a bit aggressive with it. You can use it early game for rush as well, but really there are times where you can just superior call it with Frog Witch Melissa, or Witch of Frogs Melissa, because it triggers the Soul Blast 3 that you need to call Chamomile from your soul. So there's always that play you can do. There's also the Musical Stride, which you can also use to trigger that, and there's Pyretha as well you can technically use to trigger Chamomile, so you've got quite a few avenues for that. She appears like half the time, I think, roughly, I don't know. I haven't tested too many games, but she did appear at least sometimes, so that's pretty good for that reason. Then we've got 4 copies of Apple Witch Cider. Another thing is that this is also good because she's got the Witch in her name, so she can be used with the crit trigger as well that returns the deck and draw. So that's a decent attribute as well to the card. Just remember though, if you play the old Chamomile, you won't be able to play this one. So that's always a thought. So you wouldn't run her maybe in a non-Witch deck. Then there's 4 Apple Witch Cider. So Apple Witch Cider has an end of battle Soul Charge 2, or you can bounce it to hand and Soul Charge 1. The thing is that because of the new G-Guard letting you use your field for the cost, you might be okay with just keeping this in the field and doing the extra Soul Charge, so Soul Charge 2. But if your opponent's high rolling you and you think you're going to kill you, then maybe you should bounce this to hand in that situation. Her other ability is that she can also Soul Charge 1 from hand while guarding and then gains 5k shield for every 3 cards in your soul. So ultimately you're really just getting a bit more defense with this card, and it's also giving you a lot of soul. So the soul is the important bit as well, because that's how you're making your Dragon Stride a lot better. You need as much soul as you can. Then we have 4 copies of Witcher Frog's Melissa. So Melissa is a way of winning the game through decking out your opponent, but you're not always doing that. So the main reason for this card is to trigger cards like Kalmar, Orange Witch Valencia, because you're not always doing main phase soul blasting, so she's an enabler for that as well. And you can always just tuck her in the soul with Orange Witch as well while rushing your opponent, so she's good. She's also disruptive. She can mess up some boards that could otherwise be problematic for you. She's quite decent. And then even more grade ones we have is Fixes. Fixes can search for any of your witches or sorcerers of the top 4 of your deck, so most of the cards in this deck are basically targets. And if you're going second, she's got the Abyssal Owl thing, so she's quite ideal for that. If you're on the same grade as your opponent, then you can Soul Blast 1 instead of Counter Blasting 1. So that's always nice, and of course if you use it with Orange Witch Valencia, that's also quite useful. So the searching is good because it means you can even ride your grade 3 more easily. Then we have 4 copies of Orange Witch Valencia. So again, Witcher Frogs and Melissa, even Fixus, you can Soul Blast this and then you just keep maintaining the soul size while returning cards to your deck, or you can put selected cards in like Cardamon or Kalmar into your souls, or another Orange Witch. And then her on boost is good because she can obviously tuck in 2 cards into soul, so she's also increasing her soul size. She's also good for rushing, also getting rid of attack targets for your opponents so that they can only attack the Vanguard if you want to get more damage. And then we've got the over trigger. We play this one, so the Kettle one, because we don't want to deck out by having mandatory dry checks, especially when you're using Orange Witch to reverse stack an over trigger, because what you may do is you might deck yourself out. You'll be able to put the over trigger, but then you think to yourself, well, I don't want to put the over trigger actually because it's the Kettle one and I don't want to accidentally deck myself out, because you're forced to keep on dry checking. So you play this one instead to be safe. 3 Stratus crits, we didn't have enough space before, that's why we're playing just 3. 4 copies of the Witch crit. This is a mulligan one, but also it draws a card and does basically a selective soul charge of the top 3 while milling the rest, which can help for your G-Guard plays or for your so the selective soul charge helps because it sets things up, but it also helps with the stride because the stride has an on-attack soul charge as many different grades as possible from your drop zone. We play 4 draw PGs because we don't have space in the normal unit lineup, so we've got it in the trigger lineup instead. Part of the reason why we can't play 4 Stratus crits as well. And then there's 4 heals. These are in different sleeves because I took them out of my Regai deck. I just didn't have space for them, so I've been proxying the other heal instead of the Witch heal as this card in playtesting. But yeah, this came out of my Regai deck anyway. I think you could consider playing Witch heal though, because this isn't really searchable, but it's also good because you can use it with G-Guards as well, and it's a different grade. So grade 3 heals are actually useful for G-Guarding and the stride and helping to meet targets, because it's easy to get grade 0s in your drop zone, but grade 3s aren't always as easy, so it's good for that reason. So maybe you'd play this still anyway. It's probably still a lot better than playing the grade 0 Witch. Even if you can search for the Witch, it's still kind of worth it. And then for the G units, we play 1 Clove. It has it on attack, give all your Witches 5k. Of course, if you Soul Blast on attack with this card for the cost, you can give the 5k also to your newly called Witches because she's a continuous skill. She's kind of awkward with sorcerers though, so that's kind of a good thing about the new stride, is that the new stride isn't really flexing witches, it's just anything it applies to, so she's not really the main stride anymore for this deck. Then we play Witch Queen of Congratulations. She's not that good, but she's able to fill up a niche because there's a certain void in the deck where if you can't meet the conditions of your other stride, then she's good for that reason. Amaruda requires 4 or less to get the draw 2 and soul charge 5. Otherwise you're just getting 10k in a crit. I don't really like the idea of using her just for 10k in a crit, so I usually use her to have 4 or less in soul. You can use her for Soul Blast 15 restand, but honestly in this deck list she's not that good for that skill. It's better in Regalia, where you have restanders. And of course she's good because she does a little bit of pressure, but she also builds up your soul, so you can do Veratrum plays, you can set up for your Dragon Stride next turn, that kind of stuff. Musepel is good because she can basically Soul Blast 3 to countercharge or draw and then give out 4Ks. So quite handy because she's a main phase Soul Blast as well, so you can trigger off Orange Witch, you can trigger off Chamomile. Then we've got Marduk. Marduk is good because Marduk is an on-attack Soul Blast 6, so you get extra drive. Just be careful when boosting, because if you boost you can't actually use the booster for his attack because you're striding over. So another thing as well is that unlike the GB1 play with Taro, where you couldn't actually use Taro whenever you strode this, you'd have to rely on another Soul Blast enabler. This card can just immediately call out your Cardamons, as long as you have the extra Counter Blast, which is easier in this deck list actually, to have the spare Counter Blast for Cardamon. And then we've got, well, this is a bit lazy because basically I took my G-Zone from my Regalia deck and just replaced the 6 Regalia Strides with 2 of each of the new G units and the 2 Witch cards. So that's the reason why Dismal's here, but honestly I don't think Dismal's needed because you don't really care that much about your Ray Guards in this deck list. It's not like Sea or Yggdrasil, there's no MVP Ray Guard carrying the deck that you've got to protect at all costs. Then you've got Iris. Iris can soul charge any 3 cards. It's not grade restricted, so that's handy for that reason. Put your oranges, Chamomile, Cardamons into soul. You got Tagwood. It's another condition to guarding, which helps when things get a bit awkward. 2 copies of Ear. She can soul charge the most cards, 4 cards, which is really good. So we do that when we have the different grades. More the reason why grade 3 heals are good. Then we've got 2 Witch Queen of Accomplishment Loria. So she's there to help prevent deck out as well, and she gains big shield. And then we move on to the other 2 cards because I don't actually physically own them yet. So we play 2 of these G Guardians because it's handy for defense. You're also soul charging for its cost instead of actually discarding, which is really useful, and it includes the field as well. So if you have the Apple Witch Cider and you kept in the field because you want the extra soul, then this is handy because you're getting the Apple Witch into your soul anyway, so you're still making use of it as a guardian in some form. So that's really handy as well there. It's also actually kind of similar to Cider because you basically soul charge a card from your hand to actually trigger the extra shield on this card. But you can try and hit 2 birds with 1 stone in one guard because you can then move 2 cards from your hand or field to soul. And you can take away the crits of 1 unit, so 2 crits taken away. You can get around Battledore skills or something like this, which is really nice, so more Festa cards. Or you can deal with restanders like Jewel Knight Salome, or something like Minerva, or there's even Leslie, Nightmare Doll Leslie, so this is really good for that as well. So very handy card all around. It's probably what we need the most in this current environment right now with the way the game is right now, so it's good to see something like this. And then to move on to another card we have is the Stride, so Offering Souls Dragon, Heavenly Dragon, Jagdagna Lurga. So it's a once per turn when attacking, you can G-flip and soul charge as many grades as possible and gain 10k. It's a good thing it's a 1 turn because we don't need something that's too abusable in Regalia. So quite good because it at least gives a bit more of a case for other decks to not be as bad with this. But then the card is so good because it's giving you a batch of soul to then help for its next cost, which is the every time your opponent guards you can soul blast 3 and then just call a unit. So you can use it with Cardamon in your Witch deck and then just keep calling more units to get more attacks every time they're guarding with something. You can't smash PGs of course, and G guards say cannot be hit until the battle, but still very useful. I'll show a demonstration right now on how the combo works. Basically have this Melissa as a 70k, so potentially, and you have to be a bit flexible here because it depends on the situation, depends on your opponent's hand, what you think they have, what you think they can do. You attack differently, depends on how much power your opponent's Vanguard's base is. So this is like a 17 for example. This is just hypothetical, but obviously there's a lot of different combinations that can go on. Let's say the 12k base, maybe think, okay fine, I'll do this to bait out 10k to guard. They might drop a 10k shield. You might make a judgment call to retire that Guardian and then force them to basically guard with a 5k or 0 shield from the deck, force them to drop another card as a result. Otherwise you just let it hit, let it get guarded. But then another thing that might happen then is you got this, they guard this because it's definitely worth guarding. And then what happens is that because they dropped a card onto Guardian Circle, you can then soul blast 3 cards, and you can blast 1, you call over this, you have another attacker now. They have to attempt guarding again while you've just called this out until they get their 20k shield that isn't from deck. Then you can literally soul charge 2 using Orange Witch's skill, so you've got even more soul now for the stride. And then you can follow on with something like this, swing for like 21 or whatever, or you can drop this as well, do another bit of power. And then if they guard, you might even consider calling another cardamom here, for example, and then you can just do even more combos. Once that's done, you can soul charge 2 with Apple Witches, and then you can swing with this, soul charge like various different grades from your drop zone. So 4 different cards, different grades. You have even more soul now. They'll probably PG this one most likely, otherwise you're going to have a very good day if they don't guard with the PG. And what would happen here is that they would then guard, and of course if you haven't called this already, then you might end up deciding to call this here or something in response to their PG, because even though you're not able to stop the perfect guards, you can still use a Soul Blast 3 regardless if you want to trigger a Cardamom skill. So anyways, you get your 3 drives. There's a crit trigger, so this now has power, so this can actually try and hit as well. Of course, this is assuming they haven't got a damage trigger. Again, you have to be flexible. It depends on the situation you're in. You swing with that, they attempt to guard it. Now you Soul Blast another 3 cards. Let's just get out another Cardamom, and we'll put one here. Can Blast 1, of course. And then you just swing with this. And at this point, you've made them drop a whole bunch of cards while they're guarding. So that's the idea, is that you're spreading into multiple different attacks, multiple different units. And that's pretty much it for this combo and deck profile on Genesis Witches for premium, and how you can use the new stride with it to do a little bit of pressure with it. It's quite funny, really, the deck. It's not like a super... I'm not sure if I'm ready to say it's like amazing. It definitely does lose some games. Like I did do a bit of testing, and I've lost like the Power Moon stride over and over in a handful of games. So the new Power Moon stride is very effective against this deck. So yeah, this is just one where you could potentially use a new stride. I'll probably be uploading more different deck profiles around the new stride. But until then, I will catch you later. Goodbye.